Hi everybody, Daman Mehta here, and thank you for once again joining me on my journey as I go through my favorites list on fanfiction.net. For those of you that don't know, again, I've been reading fanfiction for over a decade and a half, and my list of favorite fanfictions, which I had added to over that period of time, ballooned to over 1,200 stories. So I decided I gotta curate that shit. So I'm rereading all of them, got through over 500, and I'm seeing if they still deserve to stay on my list or not. So far, it's been about half and half. And so let's dive in. I have a bunch of stories here. These stories will all be linked in the description below, as well as a link to my fanfiction.net profile. So if you want to see the stories that have yet to show up, or you want to see what stories are still on my favorites list, as well as a forum where I'm also posting these, and a link to a playlist where everything's there. So let's dive into these stories. The first one is You're Not My Best Friend Anymore by Jack of Blades X. And this is a short one-shot Naruto fic where after a battle during Naruto Shippuden, the first time Naruto and Sasuke see each other again, they basically have a verbal fight, and Naruto and Sasuke both decide, you're not my friend, you're not my best friend anymore, and then they both start holding auditions to get a new best friend. It's stupid. No one else, basically they go through a whole bunch of different people and nobody else works as a good friend, and so that's why they just end up signing up. They still must be best friends and care about each other. The scenes, the actual audition scenes are okay. They might get a chuckle or two out of you, but the underlying premise is and the fact that the author of the story believes that Naruto was in the right in trying to redeem Sasuke throughout the entire series of Naruto kind of pisses me off. And it's not funny enough, or honestly super funny at all, really, to make me overlook that glaring fact that I don't like Sasuke, and I don't think that he should just be redeemed of all this horrible shit that he does throughout the series. So overall, I just found this one to be a waste of my time. Did not like it that much, and I don't think anybody else needs to read it either. You can just skip this and it's going to fall off my list. Next is a Harry Potter fic. This one's called Luna's Helping Hands by Rex Timms. And this is another unfinished story that only gets a little bit past the starting line before the author stopped writing, which, tons of the stories on this list have had that fate. And this is another one where it's I really wish it had continued. The main conceit of this story is that Luna basically starts setting up Harry with a harem of girls, one for each day of the week, because she ends up hearing the prophecy and figures that if love is so powerful, Harry better start learning to love a lot of people. The story gets as far as introducing the third girl with hints that Hermione might be included later down the line, but it doesn't really let anything happen because the chapters are very focused on the dates Harry has with each girl, and since he only has one date with each girl, there's not a lot to build off of. The dates are all nice, and they're very nice little pieces of fluff if you like that, but it doesn't get an overarching narrative of story, or it doesn't really build their relationships past that because there's no time and there's no scenes for that to happen. And like I said, the dates themselves, they are nice and fluffy, but they're also very simple and chaste because Harry's a shy kid, so he's not exactly gonna go, oh, on the first date let's just bang on in the open or something. And so, but he's also withdrawn and kind of personal, so it doesn't get super emotional or the deep investment cuts that are really there or like would really make repeated readings interesting. It is fun just because Luna is pretty much a fun character, and I enjoy seeing her in almost any Harry fic, but because it doesn't really get rolling that far, all that's here is a little bit of fluff, and there's better fluff fics out there. So sadly, even though I wish this had continued, there's not enough here that would really stand up for or give a reason for a person to come back to it again, and it's going to fall off my list. Alright, now back to Naruto with The Seal of Legend by Cyrock. And so this fix is a one-shot that takes place during the Chunin exams. And during the preliminaries, instead of Naruto fighting Kiba, he ends up facing Ino, and she ends up stealing a bunch of his memories. Naruto then goes to the Kyuubi to try and get those memories back, but he gets a very different set of memories, which leads to a very different Naruto. The fic doesn't follow the Naruto canon, at least history-wise, because it implies that the Biju have been around for an extremely long time, and there were like tons of people that have been the Nine Tails Jinchurikis before Naruto, whereas in canon Naruto was only the third, and like basically they were only around for like 100 years maybe. And the memories that Naruto gets from the Kyuubi are basically of each of his previous jailers, how they all died and how they lived, and so the Kyuubi meant to break Naruto emotionally, but Naruto also ends up getting all of their knowledge and abilities, as well as an intense desire to kill all the tailed beasts. And the main hook of this story would be Naruto's ability to grab like some small bit of light from the horrors that the Kyuubi gives him, and new determination. But the problem is that it really just feels like a prologue, and doesn't really feel like a complete story in and of itself. So it definitely leaves you wanting more, but at the same time, what's there doesn't feel fully satisfying in and of itself, which makes it not really worth coming back to and rereading again and again. I think it is an interesting concept and a good start for a story. I just don't think it works as a one-shot by itself, and it's not going to stay on my list. Now for something different, with a Rosario plus vampire fanfic called He Who Fights Monsters by Hawker748. And this is a much more serious take on Rosario plus vampire, which, for those of you that don't know, Rosario plus vampire is basically one of the harem anime, it's basically a harem anime where Sukune, who's a normal human, ends up going to a high school that's meant for all monsters and starts falling in love with a bunch of monsters who all want to be with him. The difference here in this story is that the initial meeting of fate, where he meets the first main girl, does not happen, and so Sukune is basically left alone and has to deal with living in this world of monsters who all want to kill humans, and by himself, which turns him a lot harder than canon. I like this story a lot. It's a really big change from this. It honestly, like, it's kind of like a For Want of a Nail change, where a little thing leads to a whole bunch of shit changing, but the tone wise it's very different, and it really highlights how lucky Sukune was in canon to get himself a collection of protectors, as the story drives him into a paranoid killing machine out of necessity. The way he deals with each of his foes and problems and the isolation he faces creates a lot of interesting drama, and it does a great job of showing how human ingenuity can overcome huge obstacles. It's a great deconstruction of the show and the idea. And if you wanted to see a darker side of the show, I think you will really enjoy this. It's also complete, which gives, extra bonus points, of course. And I just really, really like this, and it's definitely staying on my list. Okay, going back to the Harry Potter well, we have A Study in Magic by Vixit, and this is basically Harry Potter crossed over with Sherlock Holmes. Not the 2000s version, but like a Sherlock Holmes based on like the books, like the 1900s Sherlock Holmes. And Albus, instead of giving him to the Dursleys, gives Harry to Sherlock, and Sherlock teaches him, raises him up. The story itself only covers Harry's first year, and it has the problem that a lot of Harry Potter fics have, where it writes the story as if the whole 7-year Hogwarts, or like basically however it writes the story as if the entire story is about Harry and goes from Harry to Voldemort, whereas the books like treat each year as a self-contained story, and you get the arc, the whole arcs and satisfaction. That's not present in these kind of stories where it's present, but because it's a much larger time frame, the arcs spread out over multiple years. So the main problem with these series is that the first year usually ends up feeling, even though stuff happens, the entire first year still feels like just a prologue, or even just part of the prologue. And a lot of these times, these stories don't feel like they actually leave Act 1 until after the third year. And that's, again, here where it's like, this is a whole story, and it's complete, but it's marked as complete, even though the author had no plans for sequels. But at the same time, the way it's structured and the way it's written, it feels like the prologue of the full arc of him fighting Voldemort. Because it's not like Harry solves the Voldemort problem and wraps it up in his first year. It is very much like the actual first book, where it's just him dealing with Hogwarts for a year, and then learning and dealing with Voldemort and realizing that a battle is yet to come. And so that makes it feel a lot kind of underwhelming and not very satisfying. There's a bunch of changes to the plot of the year that also end up making the story feel less compelling and more like a setup, like Harry's behavior and how he acts, of how he was raised, is like setting up that like, oh, he's a detective and he has some smarts, but he's still very much learning and he hasn't picked up anything, and there's no like big aha moments, and like it makes a lot the plot points that disappear end up taking away the adventure aspect of the story and make it more feel like one big test for Harry's burgeoning abilities. And all we really get is a small, like, anything to actually challenge him is like just one small training session by Quirrell, which is meant to teach him teamwork, which also gets solved really easily, so it doesn't really feel like a challenge. And with that being the only thing that's as a challenge, there really doesn't feel like there's any stakes to the story. It doesn't feel like there's any threat. Even though Voldemort shows up at the end, like, he really only shows up at the last like 2 chapters of this story, and so it doesn't feel like there's any threat or antagonist, and so it doesn't feel like there's any point to if this was a full story. And again, that ends up feeling like, again, just feels like a prologue. So it just doesn't really feel satisfying, and so I'm not going to keep this on my list. Next is Fate Stay Night fanfic. This one is a short one-shot humor fic, which is where Shiro basically treats... I forgot the name. The name is A Wild Fanfic Appears by Mario Flere. And this is basically a joke about how Shiro is treating the Holy Grail War like a Pokemon battle, and we get this. This is all based around a small scene during the Fate Stay Night Fate route, where they're running away from Ilya and Berserker after they went to the castle. Like, it's a bunch of references, and it's really, really funny. Like, it's a lot of just poking fun at, like, if Shiro had treated it with like Pokemon mechanics and stuff. And I just bust a gut when I read this, and I read it again, and I read it multiple times. Just even went to reread. I definitely recommend this if you know anything about Pokemon. I found it to be super funny, and it's just super short, really quick joke, gets in and out, and it's gonna stay on my list. And the last one for this video is called Dancing with Trees by JerryWay69. Sorry, let me see. Okay, sorry. It's called Dancing with Trees by JerryWay69, and this is another Harry Potter fic that starts when Harry's 7 years old, and basically the Dursleys end up trying to kill him, and Harry stumbles his way to Luna's house, and they start living. He basically gets adopted by Luna and Luna's family. The story is unfinished, and it only gets a little bit past the sorting before it stops, which leads, as I've said before, to the common problem of everything here just being set up in prologue, which is very true. And the author themselves made a small note about possibly rewriting the fic before it stopped. There's nothing really noteworthy here aside from one scene that stands out just because it acts like metaphorical sexual abuse against a 10-year-old girl by a monster. Again, it's all metaphorical. It's not actual sexual abuse. It's just metaphorical. But just the fact that that kind of metaphor even exists stands out, Granted, the imagery of me saying that, is a lot more striking than the scene itself. But it's just like me describing the scene. It's just, Luna has a special gift that she was going to give Harry, and a monster comes in and attacks her and takes it away from her. Granted, the gift is something a bunch of magic that would make them both immortal, but the scene and the context itself is off, and that jarringness makes it stay in the head. But the particulars of it, I can't remember a lot about it aside from its context and what it's supposed to mean. Aside from that scene, there's nothing really big or important that stands out. Nothing that is really interesting. There's not a lot of funny, and again, it's all like set up in prologue. So aside from that scene, there's nothing that stays in the mind, and it's gonna fall off my list. So there we have it. A couple more stories for you guys to take a look at. Again, links are in the description, as well as links to my fanfiction.net profile, my forum thread where I post all these, as well as a playlist so you can watch the entire journey from the beginning. Please, like this video or leave a comment if you liked what I'm doing. If you want to keep up to date when I post these, please subscribe to the channel. I try to post these once a week and keep going, and I still got a shit ton more stories to read, so I got at least another 2 years of me doing this, so it's still a long journey. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.